AG, I just want people to, I mean, they know that you're serving right now as the Attorney General of the great state of Minnesota. You were the lead, your team, and you always, I mean, you did this in a way that very few leaders would do. You allowed your great team to do their work, but you became more nationally and internationally known because of the prosecution of what happened in the George Floyd death case, the conviction of former Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin on the charge of second-degree murder. Now, before you became the Attorney General of the great state of Minnesota, you represented them in the United States House of Representatives. It is a seat now that Rep. Ilhan Omar holds. I remember us campaigning to help her get elected. And you are an author extraordinaire. The title of the book, again, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. Yes, our team has just put that book up. Please get that book. I am reading that book right now. It will open your eyes to so many things. It gives us a behind the scenes look at what was happening in that case and so much more. So AG, you refer to the need to end the cycle of police violence as a reckoning. And you go even further to say that it's a racial reckoning. Why this description? And do you believe our country is ready to deal with this reckoning?
Well, we certainly can. We can end police violence, but we've got to do two things. And if you don't do these two things, you might not be able to do much of anything. The first thing is you got to prosecute crime, whether the perpetrator has a badge or not. And if you have a system of impunity where some people can just murder others and never face accountability, there's no level of training or other stuff that's ever gonna work. And then the other thing you gotta do is you gotta use administrative discipline. You've gotta fire people, and you've gotta get letters in their employment file fast when they abuse the laws. And you've gotta have strict discipline. One of the things we saw in the George Floyd case involving Derek Chauvin, the man who killed him, is he had 18 excessive force complaints. And like, if somebody would have intervened with Derek Chauvin at 12, called him in the office and said, what is going on with you? Why are you having all these complaints? What are you doing wrong? You know what? He may have quit the force, he may have been fired, but he wouldn't be doing 22 and a half years in prison. George Floyd would be alive. So all this lax administrative stuff where you just don't hold people accountable, it actually makes, you're setting them up for failure. I tell you, there's one case, Senator, that the world does not know that much about, and that is a case involving John Pope, who was 14 years old when Derek Chauvin kneeled on his neck for 17 minutes.
Oh my.
Now this kid, John Pope, didn't die, but when he got, after Derek Chauvin got investigated and all the cases started coming to light, he got indicted for that crime federally and ended up having to plead guilty to it. But his administrators and his sergeants are like, oh, well, that's not a problem. So we gotta hold them accountable.
Yeah, AG, your point about, I mean, basically what you're saying is that the leadership, the temperature or the culture, if you will, of any law enforcement agency primarily starts at the top. And that any of the fissures or failures, that is primarily about the culture of the department itself, primarily, and not holding law enforcement officials accountable, getting them the support that they need, praising them when necessary, but making sure that you hold them accountable. But AG, there will be a group, there are certain people in this country who would say it's not law enforcement. It's unfair to expect law enforcement to solve all of the ills of this country. It's not fair to them. They under high pressure, high stress jobs. Why should they be held accountable for, this is par for the course, what happens in the streets, what they see on a regular basis, and why should they be held accountable for their actions?
Well, they have to be accountable because the Constitution to the United States says that there'll be no unreasonable searches and seizures. Basically, it means the government cannot use arbitrary violence and force against you and take your stuff. if you're gonna call yourself a democracy, not a dictatorship, not a monarchy, whatever, if you're gonna call yourself a representative democracy, you've got to have restrictions and controls on the government. And government agents, armed agents of the state, beating people with impunity means that you live in a police state. So that's why there's got to be accountability, because the people of the United States deserve to live in a democratic nation where there's accountability under law and where there's restrictions on government action. Also, the Equal Protection Clause. You can't say that some people it's open season on them. George Floyd is a black man who's unemployed, therefore you can do whatever you want to him. He has no rights, which a white man's bound to respect. You know what I mean? You can't, so that's why there's gotta be accountability. But here's the third reason, I just gotta tell you this. Police officers who want to protect and serve are absolutely up to doing their job right. Don't insult the men and women who serve in departments every day trying to do the right thing by saying that they can't be expected to do the right thing. There's a black woman police officer in Buffalo, New York. Her name is Carrie L. Horn. She saw her partner abusing a suspect in custody.
I remember that case.
She physically intervened and they fired her.
Yes.
And it took her 15 years to get her pension and her job back. Let's support Carrie L. Horn.
That's right. That's exactly. But AJ, you leading us down a path of, there is, going back to culture, there is this notion within law enforcement agencies that you protect at all costs. In other words, regardless of whether or not it's clear that your colleague transgressed in a way that takes somebody's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness away, being a part of the club is more important than standing up for the truth. And that is why, Ms. Horn was not supported, because she went against the internal code, of law enforcement agencies. And that's unfortunate, because it does hurt good law enforcement officers. And I keep saying law enforcement because you and I know, and I know many of our viewers know, there's sheriff's department, police department,
all of them.
Others, not just the police, it's other law enforcement agents out there trying to do their job.